Should have the Kalim.
Kilayim.
What did I say? What
You
did I
said
say?
Kalim. Yeah, we are doing Kalim, but not
Kalim. We are
not
doing
not, not
Kalim,
right now.
and I'm looking right at the word Kalayim. I'm looking right here. Kalayim.
What's
Base.
an aleph? What's an
Base.
aleph between friends?
That's true. Base Zion. If the point of a wheat field entered one of barley, it is permitted because it is evidently the end of his field. If this is wheat and his neighbor's is another species, he is permitted to plant close to it of the same species.
Okay,
If this
just pause there for a second because this is an important point
Mhm.
that we're making over here is that when you've got Rosh Tor, that Rosh Tor is as you see there's a little diagram in the Kahati. You see it
Right,
looks like a little
right.
movie camera, a square and a triangle. So if there's a single point of contact between the two fields or the two planted areas, then it's evident that they're not the same field. It's very clear that they're separated. So they can even be basically touching, but as long as it's a point and not side by side.
Side by side, right.
Right. And that's going to come in handy in coming Mishnayos and how things can be planted, as long as it's just a point of contact and not an area of contact.
And I would assume that these two people have gotten together and said, "Listen, I'm going to plant this. You're going to plant that. How do you want to do this?" And they arrange this
It
beforehand.
doesn't even need to be between two people. This is one person here. One person
One
can
person,
plant.
right?
He
Okay.
can plant one field with wheat, and plant a field of barley that has a point that goes into it.
Hmm.
And that's okay because it's evident. Remember, the Issa Doraisa is planting them together, literally together.
Right.
That's the Issa Doraisa. All the rest of the stuff about them not appearing to be intermingled is a Durabanan for Maris Ayin.
Right.
It's for yeah for Maris Ayin. It's for Hekela Davar. Just a gezerah just to make sure that you don't come to the Ikar Doraisa.
If
Okay.
where the wheat is in that diagram,
Mhm.
okay, and where the wheat is, if on the I guess the right side of that, if he wanted to plant something else, spelt or whatever, he would have to make another point going
Yes.
into his there. So it would always have
Yeah,
to be a
that's
point
right.
somewhere there, right?
So if they're points, right, there must be points
Right.
of contact, not lines of contact, unless there's actually a physical separation between them, like a fence.
Right.
If you see
Right.
a fence in between them, then that's okay.
Didn't we have something with trees also?
That's right. We
Oh,
had
oh,
the
hang
but,
on.
but we had with trees, but the context there was with paya. We were
Ah.
talking about can you take paya from one tree for all the field if there's a fence in between, and the
Mhm.
fence and we said the fence is mafsik unless the trees are
Fine.
intertangled on top. That's called serah kotesh.
Right.
That
Right.
wasn't a question of kilayim. That was a question of paya.
Okay. If his wheat and his neighbor's wheat, if his is wheat and his neighbor is wheat, he is permitted to plant close to it a bed of flax, but not another bed of species. Reb Shimon says, especially linseed or any other species. Reb Yossi says, even in the center of his field, it is permitted to test with a furrow of flax.
Okay, so what's the deal with flax? Is that flax is harmful to the whatever's going around. It's invasive and it draws away the nutrition from the soil. Or whatever. I'm just speculating here, but that's the presumption is that if somebody is planting flax, it's clear that they're not intending to keep it there. They're just testing to see if the field is capable of growing flax, and it's just in this little area that they're doing it, and they're going to uproot it at a later stage. So there we permit them, says Rabbi Yossi, we permit him to grow it even in the middle of his field because it's clear that he's going to uproot it.
One may not plant close to a grain field mustard or safflower, but one may plant close to a vegetable field mustard or safflower. And one may plant close to a fallow field, to a plowed field, to a stone fence, to a road, to a fence which is 10 tefachim high, to a ditch which is 10 deep and 4 wide, to a tree which overshadows the ground, and to a rock 10 high and 4 wide.
Okay, that's what I just mentioned. If you've got a mafsek, if you've got some sort of clear boundary between them, then you are allowed to plant different species close to each other.
It's called a masik,
Mafsek,
mafsik. It's not called a makitza.
mechitza, mafsek, whatever.
Same thing.
It's
It's in
something that delineates
separate.
between the
Right.
two.
Okay. If one wishes to lay out his field in patches of differing species, he may make 24 patches to a Beit Sa'ah, each patch one Beit Rova, and sow in it any species which he wishes. There he may not sow them with mustard because it looks like a mustard field. So Rav Meir, so says Rav Meir, but the Chachamim say 9 patches are permitted, 10 are forbidden. Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov says even if all his field is a bet core, he may not make it in more than 1 patch.
Right, so you see these little diagrams over here, and when
Right.
they've said they've basically broken down the field of so a beit sa'ah. So a sa'ah, remember we said is 24 rovas, right? Because a rova is a quarter of a kav, and a kav is a sixth of a sa'ah, so that makes 24.
Right.
Okay, so the diagram that they've broken it down to is 1 in 25. So really, we're dealing with a bit of an approximation over here, because each square over here is actually slightly less than a base rova, because it's 1/25,
right.
not 1/24.
Right.
Okay, but the point being over here that if you break it down into these 5 by 5 squares over here, so you can plant them with in this 3 by 3 matrix in the first diagram in Kahati, so that you can so that you've got a gap of a base rova in between. And that's
Right.
the important thing. So so each of those 9 blocks can be a different species, and that's fine, because because they've been separated nicely. Okay. There's another alternative way of doing it is in the second diagram. We've got the 9 laid out in that sort of arrowhead, or not quite an arrow, but that also shows that because there's sort of the gaps because they're planted diagonally touching each other, it's just a single point of contact on each field, and that could be okay. The question in my mind is, if you can do that, then why wouldn't you be allowed to replant the remaining 4? Which I don't understand this particular opinion. The
remaining 4 are
יש מפרשים שלא נחלקו חכמים רבי מאיר בטעם שצריך. Yeah, I don't really understand why they can't, why they couldn't have filled in the remaining 4 blocks, so that they could have 13. They could have had 13 blocks planted like that.
Which 4 are you talking about? Starting from in the second diagram.
In the second diagram, you see, if you just fill in all of the diagonals, if it was a chessboard, you'd fill in all the black squares.
Right.
Now
Okay.
there are 4 squares that aren't filled in.
Right.
And I'm curious as to why those squares would not be you couldn't plant those. If you're allowed to touch them on the diagonals, then why wouldn't you be allowed to do those last 4 squares?
No, I see it. It's in the first column on the left, my left over here. It would be the third one and the last one. Am I correct?
Correct. That's what I got too.
That's true. It's a good question. Why not? If you should be able to do that. It would fill in the diagonal and all.
But so Kahati says that afilu chabushos, even like so according to Das Chachamim, Tesha karachos b'beis einon niros kilayim. So if you only got 9, then it doesn't look like kilayim. But if you push it up to 10 inside the beis then it starts looking like kilayim. It's starting to look too crowded. That's the explanation that I see over there. Anyway, it's
okay. Right. The diagonals will look too closed in. Then that's what he's saying. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Right. Mishna Yud. Okay, so these are the new Mishnayos for today, although we didn't really do any of the previous ones because of Purim and Shabbos. So, Mishna Yud. Kol shehu besoch beis rova. Anything that's in the inside the space of a base rova. Now the base rova, that's a small measure, right? That's the 24th of a base let's say base sa'ah, right? Okay. Ole b'midas base rova. So remember, we have to have that space of a base rova in between the areas that are planted. But anything that's inside those areas that's planted also counts for that area, including areas that could not be planted, even if we wanted to. Achilas gefen. So, for example, if you had a grapevine inside there, If you had
Right.
just a grape, you wouldn't be allowed to plant within 6 tvachim of the
Right.
grapevine.
Right.
Okay, if it was just a single grape plant. But if it was a kerem, you'd have to have daled amas. But if it's just a single grape, then you have to keep six tvachim away. Now, if that's inside the base rova, you can count that as part of the base rova. You don't need to put extra distance because of the grapes. Same thing for vakever, vasela. If you had a grave in that area, or if you had just bedrock that you wouldn't have been able to plant inside there, all in Bermuda base rova, that also counts towards the spacing of the base rova that you need to leave between the different species.
So
Right?
if you had this grapevine or the grave, a rock, so let's use the measure of 10, it makes it easy, and it took up two spaces, that would be included in the count.
Yeah, it would be
Right?
included in the count. That it would be included in the count. It counts towards the base rova that you need to have between
Which was right.
your two different species, and that's fine. Tavua betvua base rova. So the gap that you require between different types of grain, right? You have barley and wheat and spelt, and right. So that gap that you need to leave between your squares of grain, that has to be a base rova in order to show in order to have a nice space. Okay. Yarak be yarak. However, if it's vegetables, right? Vegetables take up a smaller area. You're not planting whole fields of it. Okay. The shisha tvachim. You only need the gap of 6 tvachim. That's enough between your vegetables, and that in order to show that they're not kilayim. Okay. Tavua b'yarak. Now, what happens if you've got wheat and you want to plant some spinach next to your wheat? Yarak b'tvua, or vice versa, base rova. So the chachamim say that you need to take the stringent measure of the base rova and leave that between your vegetables and your grain. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yarak Betvua Shisha Tvachim. He says you take the more lenient measure, that you only need to leave 6 tvachim because the concern is from the side of the vegetables, and that doesn't look like Yarak Betvua, and it doesn't look like Kilayim.
I wonder why they say grain with vegetables or vegetables with grain. It's the same thing.
I know it's an odd thing. It may be that the one already exists and you're coming to plant the other one. So we're just making it clear that there's no difference whether the wheat came first or the spinach came first. Okay. Yud Aleph, Tavua nota al gabe tavua. What happens if you have a kind of grain that is inclined over other grain? So there are two different types. So let's say you've got wheat and barley. And you put the required distance between them. In other words, the base rova. But after they've grown, the stalks are nice and tall, and if the wind blows, they lean over the other ones.
Right.
So okay, the yarak al gabe yarak, or similarly with vegetables over vegetables, if they started to grow over each other, yarak al gabe tvua, or if it's vegetables on top of produce, or tvua al gabe yarak al gabe tvua. So whichever combination it is, hakol mutar. It all doesn't matter. If it's just the wind that blows it over the one, as long as you planted them separately, you don't have to worry too much about the wind. Chutz mi delas Yavanis, unless you're talking about Greek good. Why? Because Greek good has got very big leaves.
It says it spreads out.
Spreads out, and this is and this now looks like Kilayim. And again, all the time we're saying here it looks like Kilayim. It's not actually Kilayim because they weren't planted together. But it still looks like Kilayim, and we're worried about this. That we shouldn't have people seeing that this looks like they're growing together. Right, Maris Ayin, as we learned in Kashrus, right? That Maris Ayin, you want to make sure that nobody makes a mistake and thinks, oh, it's permitted to plant these together.
Right.
Okay, so we have to separate those out. Rabbi Meir Omer af hakishus upulamitri. He says also in this category of the Greek good are the kishus and pulamitri. The translation is what? You can give me the Egyptian beans. What's kishus?
Cucumber and Egyptian beans.
Also have, okay, so he agrees. He says, I have a Masorah, says Rabbi Meir, that also the cucumbers and the Egyptian beans, but to tell you the truth, says Rabbi Meir, I actually prefer Chachamim's opinion from what I've learned.
Mm.
Okay. He says I agree. You really shouldn't have to be to also them. But you know, Kach kibalti mi Rabbosai, this is the Masorah I received from my teachers. That these other species are also prohibited, and I can't really back down from it. But to tell you the truth, I think the Chachamim are right on this one. There's nice intellectual honesty that you see among the Tanaim, where they say, listen, I've got a Masorah, but honestly, yours sounds better.
That's why I'm laughing. It's like,
Okay. Perek Gimel. Aruga shehi shisha tefachim al shisha tefachim. Okay, so you have a square of a vegetable patch basically. Okay, the vegetable patch over here is a small little thing that's in your back garden. What are we talking about? 6 by 6 tefachim.
Mm-hmm.
How much is a tefach? A tefach is like about 10 centimeters, maybe.
Right.
Okay, so you're talking about 60 centimeters squared. Very small little vegetable patch we're talking about over here. Not even a meter. It's a little over half a meter. Okay, and you want to and we're trying to do a little Guinness Book of Records thing and say how many different species are we allowed to plant inside here, and not violate Kilayim. Okay, let's go. Here come the Chachamim to try and see how many different species of vegetables we can squeeze into this 6 by 6 square. Zorim besocha chamisha zeronim. 5 types of species, says the Tanakama. Arba ba'arba ruchos haruga va'echad be'emtza. And you see in the first diagram over here, there's we've got each tefach. We're assuming that you can plant things in the space of a tefach, of a tefach squared. So you can put one species along the 4 by 1 on each edge, and another tefach in the well, it's basically 2 by 2, because because the diamond inside the diamond circumscribed by the square will have exactly half the area of the square. So the 4 by 4, no, it's actually not 2 by 2. It'll be 8 square amas, because the inner square, the square there is 16 square amas, 4 by 4. So the dark square inside it will be 8 square amas.
Yeah. Is this because they're able to do this in all these diagrams because of the point?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point why I emphasized that earlier, is that because they're only touching on a point, that's permitted.
Right.
Okay, so we say, here you go, you can fit in five species inside this little square. Now, if it has a border, oh, by the way, there's another alternative way. The second diagram shows an alternative way of how you could do it. You could have one. You could have a square on each corner instead of on the edges. You could have a square on each corner and have a larger square in the middle. Again, touching only on the corners.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what happens if you have a border around it that is that has a height of a tefach? And now that border serves as a separation.
Are you talking about the C now, diagram C?
No, this is going to be diagram C, correct?
Right. Okay.
Okay. So now, what is the border? The border adds to this. Gova tefach and verachav tefach, and it's also got it's another tefach wide. So you can see that in diagram C that the matrix, the original matrix that we had inside there has changed. You've got you've got the 6 by 6s inside the border, and now you've basically got an 8 by 8 around the an 8 tefach boundary around the outside. Okay, it's another tefach wide, but the width of each of the thing is now 8 because it overshoots by a tefach on each side.
And I'm trying to see in C, if you look at the top one, and then the one that's on the let's say the left or right side, is there a little space there, or the corners are touching? I can't tell from the diagram.
So are you talking about the square the square space? That's designating the boundary between the two, to show that it's been elevated, so that you don't have and the elevation serves to separate it from the pit that's planted in the middle.
Right. Right. Okay.
Okay. So now in such a circumstance, the Mishnah tells us, Zorin besocha shlosha asar. You can put in 13 species. Shlosha I'll call gvul or gvul. On all the edges, you can put 3 because if you look at if you count the gap, remember it's 8 across.
Right.
So you can put a tefach gap on each corner, which leaves 6 in the middle, and then you can and then you've got basically you can put a tefach actually a tefach and a half, or you still need to have a tefach in between each of them. So that leaves you with wait, you had 6, now you got 4 tefachim, and you can take it's basically 1 1/3 tefachim of the dark patches that you can plant on each border, and then 1 in the middle. Shlosh al kol gvul gvul ve'echad be'emtza, and you can plant the middle in that diamond pattern, so it only looks like it's touching. Okay.
So do we get more product out of diagram D than we would with A?
Okay, so hold on with we haven't got to diagram D yet.
Right.
We'll get there now.
Okay.
Okay, so we've just described diagram C.
C. Right.
Okay. בגבול אחד באמצע. לא יצא ראש הלפס בסוף הגבול מפני שהוא ממלאהו. We haven't gotten into explain that properly yet. אחד באמצע. Min echad be'emtza aruga, right? That was number 3. Now I want to see how do we get into number 4. Oh yeah, that's the final opinion. Okay, beg your pardon. So loita rosha lefes besoch hagvul. Now you shouldn't put turnips inside the border because the turnips are going to grow and spread. Okay, and then it's going to start looking like Kilayim again. Now Rabbi Yehuda comes and says, Shisha be'emtza. In this situation, you got the border right, but why can't you put 6 inside the middle? And that's his diagram over there with the
Right.
6 diamonds that you could put all together, and thereby have a full mixture. Now, I also wonder, like, why couldn't you put 9 in the middle? You could make basically 9 diamonds like that in the middle quite comfortably as well. So why stop there? Let's just see what Kahati says about Rabbi Yehuda. 6 in the middle. In other words, the aruga is 6 by 6 tfachim with the border around it. Okay, and you can plant 18 minim because you got 12 around the edges with 3 on each edge, as in the previous case, as the Tanakama explained, and 6 minim in the middle, basically in the shape of a rhombus. Okay, as in diagram 4. D. And I've got 30 tefachim, all planted.
How would you put in the middle? You said you wanted to add another in the middle.
Well, compress them into squares. Compress them into squares so that each, instead of having rhombuses of 3, because they're circumscribed by a 3 by 2 rectangle, have squares circumscribed by a 2 by 2 square.
Right. Okay.
רבי יהודה חולק על תנא גם בעניין הרישא, הוא סובר שארוגה שהיא 6 על 6 טפחים זורים בסוף 6 מילים. Yeah, so it looks like Rabbi Yehuda is also disagreeing with the Tanakama in the first part. So where we saw the 5 species that he's got over there, he could take exactly that 6 by 6 that you see inside. If you cut off the border, then you could plant the middle exactly like that with the 6 rhombuses. Instead of doing it in the way that the Tanakama has described over there. Now, yeah, I must be honest, I don't understand why you couldn't do 3 by 3 if you imkvar, if you're allowed to plant if you're allowed to plant 3x2 like this with those rhombuses, then why couldn't you do 3x3 with squares, seeing as they're all touching their corners? Unless again it looks too tough off. And Rabbi Yehuda is saying that three, and the Tanakama, why would the Tanakama not agree with Rabbi Yehuda? Maybe the Tanakama says it just looks too tzafuf, too compressed, and that just looks like Kilayim. So that would be too much. So it seems to be like a matter of opinion of what looks okay and what doesn't. Okay. Yeah, that's our Mishnahs for the day. Let's
No,
go.
we have that other diagram E, which you were explaining, but
Oh, right. Diagram E. That's kind of footnote over there of another way of looking at the edges, of looking at the ratio. That diagram E is a possible other interpretation of diagram A.
it looks completely different.
Yes, it does look completely different. It doesn't look like you're getting maximum usage out of your space. So I think diagram A it seems a little more likely.
So is diagram D the one that you would get more produce from then, I guess? I guess you would have to say.
Well, diagram D that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying that you can put the six squares in the middle, whereas the Tanakama is saying you can only put one square in the middle.
But why only one square?
Yeah, so that's the difficulty over here. That I think it's a matter of opinion as to what looks too like it's just too many species.
Too many things, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Demai.
Yeah. Demai. Zayin Gimel.
Zayin Gimel. The laborer, if a laborer does not trust the employer, he takes one dried fig and declares, this and 9 after it are rendered Misa for the 90 that I eat. This is rendered Truma Misa for them, and the last is Misa Sheni and is redeemed with money. And he saves one dried fig. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, let him not save because it reduces his work for the employer. Reb Yossi says, let him not save because it is a condition stipulated by the court. Dalit. If one buys wine on Kuthians, he declares 2 logs which I shall separate are Truma, and 10 Misa, and 9 Misa Sheni. He redeems and drinks. One had several figs in his house, and he was in the house of study in the field. He says, 2 figs which I shall separate are Tuma, and 10 Misa Rishon, and 9 Misa Sheni. If they were Demai, he declares, what I shall separate tomorrow is Meiser, and adjoining it is the rest of the Meiser that I will have rendered Meiser as, which I rendered Meiser is rendered Truma Meiser for it. And Meiser Sheni is the north or in the south of it, and is redeemed with money.
Okay. Paya Dalit Hay.
After we finish Demai, where are we going after that?
Back into Kilayim.
Back into Kilayim again. Okay. All right. Okay. Paya, we have Dalit.
Dalit Hay.
What'd I say?
Dalit. Oh, am I right? Yeah, Dalit Hay. You said Dalit.
Okay. 3 times a day in the morning, at midday, and at mincha time. Rabbi Gamliel says they stated this is a minimum. Rabbi Akiva says they stated this is a maximum. Of Bet Nama would collect by the rope, and they would give payah from each furrow. If a non-Jew reaped his field and afterwards he converted, he is exempt from leket, from shicha, and from payah. Rabbi Yehuda obligates regarding shicha, and for shicha is only at the time of the imur. If a person consecrated standing ears and he redeemed standing ears, he is liable. Sheaves and he redeemed sheaves, he is liable. Standing ears and he redeemed sheaves, he is exempt. For at the time when he became liable, it was exempt.
Okay.
You got my note, I guess, about the Zoom when you asked that question?
Yes, I did. And I didn't get any other responses. So.
Oh, that's good. All right, let's go by the majority. I really enjoy Zoom. It's so nice. I don't know. Okay, we have Zion.
I just spend the rest of my day on Zoom, so I get Zoom fatigue.
I really enjoy it. Okay, Zion Daled. Regarding all bloodstains found anywhere, they are tahor, except for those found in rooms and the vicinity of chambers of tumah. Kuthian chambers of tumah convey tumah by means of ohel, because the Kuthians bury their stillborns there. Reb Yehuda says they do not bury them, rather they cast them there, and wild animals will drag them away.
So we said that Rabbi Yehuda's his scorn for the Kusim, and says like they're so like base that they just toss
Right.
away their
You're
things. But
kidding.
that turns out to be a kula, because now you don't have to be worried about the tumor from the stillborns.
They are trusted when they say we buried stillborns there, or we did not bury them there. They are trusted when they say about an animal if it has already given birth to its first offspring, or if it has not yet given birth to its first offspring. They are trusted with regard to the marking of graves, but they are not trusted with regard to overhangs, nor with regard to protrusions, nor with regard to base apras. This is the general rule concerning a matter in which they are suspect. They are not trusted about it.
Okay, so this is so the general rule about them is that if it's something that they don't where it's a derabanan, or where it's a Torah sheb al peh, then we don't trust them, because they don't hold by it. But when it comes to, but if it's something that's explicit deraisa, then they're very strict about it. But only if we see them acting lekula,
doing it
for themselves, because they also don't hold by lipnei aver. They're quite happy to lie to you and say no, it's fine, when it's not really.
If a woman finds a blood stain on her flesh opposite the genitals, she is tummy. But if the stain is not opposite the genitals, she is tahor. If the stain is found on her heel or on the tip of her big toe, she is tummy. If the stain is found on her leg or on her feet, on the inside she is tummy, but on the outside she is tahor, and on the sides, on either side, she is tahor. If she found a stain on a tunic from the belt and down, she is tummy. From the belt and up, she is tahor. If she found a stain on the sleeve of a tunic, then, if it reaches opposite the genitals, she is tummy, but if not, she is tahor. If she used to taking the tunic off and covering herself with it at night, no matter where the stain is found, she is tummy, because the tunic moves around, and similarly for palium.
Yeah. Right, now we can go for Kilayim.
All right. All right. I'll tell you. I'll tell you when we finish. Okay. Yud Daled. The tummy parts of a wagon are as follows: the metal yoke, the crossbar, the tips that are designed to accept the straps, the iron under the neck of the animal, the pulling ring, the harness, the plates, the clapper, the hook, and the nail that connects parts together. The taha parts of a wagon are as follows: a yoke that is plated, tips made for ornamentation, tubes that produce sound, the lead spheres on the side of the animal's neck.
Lead.
What I said? Oh, the
lead
spheres. Lead. All
it's
right.
spelled the same, but
I know. I have too many college degrees. I don't know. The lead spheres on the side of the animal's neck, the rim of the wheel, the metal sheets, the plating, and all the other nails are tahor. The metal shoes of animals are tameh, but those made of sham are tahor. At what point does a sword become susceptible to tumah? When one polishes it, and another knife becomes susceptible to tumah when one sharpens it. The metal cover of a teni that one made into a mirror, Rabbi Yehuda rules it tahor, but the Kakaman rule it tameh. A mirror that broke, if it does not reflect the greater part of the face, it is tahor.
Yeah, Adkan. Sanhedrin.
Dalet Aleph. Both civil cases and capital cases require inquiry and examination, as it is stated, one judgment you shall have for yourselves. What is the difference between civil cases and capital cases? Civil cases are tried by 3, capital by 23. Civil cases open with a consideration of either acquittal or liability. Capital cases must open with the consideration of acquittal, not guilt. Civil cases decided by the majority of 1, whether for acquittal or liability, and capital cases decided by a majority for 1 for acquittal, but not by a majority for 2 for guilt. Civil decisions may be reversed in favor of acquittal or liability, and capital cases may be reversed only in favor of acquittal, but not in favor of guilt. In civil cases, anyone may argue either for acquittal or liability. In capital cases, anyone may argue for acquittal, but not everyone may argue for guilt. Trials are not held on Friday or on the day before a festival. In judging cases of Tumah and Tahara, they begin from the most eminent. In capital cases, they begin from the side. All are eligible to judge civil cases, but not all are eligible to judge capital cases. Only Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim who are eligible to have their daughters marry Kohanim. The Sanhedrin was seated in the shape of a semicircle, threshing floor so that they should see one another. 2 judicial scribes stand before them, one to the right, one to the left, and they record the words of those who defend and those who convict. Rabbi Yehuda says 3. One records the words of those who defend, one records the words of those who convict, and the third records the words of both of those who defend and those who convict.
Okay.
And Sukkah.
Yeah. Base.
Sukkah. I'm sorry, what did you say? Base.
Base.
Right? I thought you said hay base. If one supports a sukkah on the legs of a bed, it's valid. Rabbi Yehuda says if it cannot stand by itself, it is invalid. A disarranged sukkah or one whose shade area is greater than its sunlight area is valid. If the sukkah is thickly covered like a house, even though the stars cannot be seen from inside, it's valid. If one makes a sukkah on top of a wagon or on top of a deck of a ship, it's valid, and we may go up onto it and on the festival. If he makes a sukkah in the top of a tree or on the back of a camel, it's valid, but we may not go up in it on the festival.
Right, because you're not allowed to climb trees on Yom Tov, and you're not allowed to ride an animal on Yom Tov.
Right. But if he makes a sukkah in the top of a tree, on the back of a camel, on the very top of a tree, all right, okay, forget. I was thinking if there were branches and stuff above it, I don't know. But, all right. If 2 walls are in a tree and one is man-made, and 2 are man-made and one is in a tree, it's valid. But we may not go up onto the festival. If 3 walls are man-made and one is in a tree, it's valid, and we may go up into it on the festival. This is the general rule. Wherever the tree can be removed and the sukkah can stand by itself, it's valid, and we may go up into it on the festival.
Right, but if you need the tree to be there in order for the sukkah to stand, then you're not allowed to climb it on Yom Tov.
No. If one makes a sukkah between the trees and the tree service walls, it's valid. Those who are engaged in the performance of a mitzvah are exempt from the mitzvah of sukkah, and ill people and their attendants are exempt from the mitzvah of sukkah. And we may eat and drink casually outside the sukkah. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Shkoyach.
Yeah, up to you. You can shut the